Epilogue. How would humans know about the existence of God? Mankind is lost in this regard. The responsibility sits squarely with God to reach out to humanity. C.S. Lewis, writer and professor of English literature at Oxford and Cambridge, drew this analogy, quote, "If Shakespeare and Hamlet could ever meet, it must be Shakespeare's doing," end quote. That is to say, Shakespeare as the author could write himself into the play and initiate a dialogue with Hamlet, but not the other way around. Could it be that God has written himself into human history? Lewis was a committed atheist and deeply resisted the idea of the existence of God. Yet, as a literary scholar, he knew that the Gospels did not appear to be mythological literature. One day, an atheist friend made the inadvertent comment to Lewis that, quote, "All that stuff about the dying God, it almost looks as if it had really happened once," end quote. Somehow that comment from the most unexpected source put an end to years of objection and cognitive resistance. For Lewis, it evoked the epiphany that God existed. Lewis said he must have been the most reluctant convert in all England. Lewis later went on to become a prolific proponent of Christianity, much of his writing directed to answering common objections to Christian faith. Blaise Pascal was a 17th-century French mathematician, physicist, and Christian philosopher. A collection of his thoughts published posthumously, Pensées, French for thoughts, contains a logical argument by Pascal that has become known as Pascal's wager. Pascal draws an analogy to the decision of faith with betting on a coin toss. Pascal writes, "Let us then examine this point and say, God is or he is not. But to which side shall we incline? Reason can decide nothing here. There is an infinite chaos which separated us. A game is being played at the extremity of this infinite distance where heads or tails will turn up. What will you wager? According to reason, you can do neither the one thing nor the other. According to reason, you can defend neither of the propositions. Do not then reprove for error those who have made a choice, for you know nothing about it. No, but I blame them for having made, not this choice, but a choice. For again both he who chooses heads and he who chooses tails are equally at fault. They are both in the wrong. The true course is not to wager at all." Yes, but you must wager. It is not optional. You are embarked. Which will you choose, then? Let us see. Since you must choose, let us see which interests you least. You have two things to lose, the true and the good, and two things to stake, your reason and your will, your knowledge and your happiness. And your nature has two things to shun, error and misery. Your reason is no more shocked in choosing one rather than the other, since you must of necessity choose. This is one point settled. But your happiness? Let us weigh the gain and the loss in wagering that God is." End quote. In a way, it seems mundane to compare a decision of faith to wagering on a coin toss. If Pascal were explicitly comparing the decision of faith to gambling, it would be a trivialization. This was not Pascal's intent. Sincere faith cannot be feigned, nor can God be impressed with superficial appearances. Rather, the practicality of Pascal's argument is compelling. He defines an inescapable decision having inherent components of uncertainty. Pascal bids us to choose faith in God. One may say, "I choose not to wager." An agnostic position is illogical, however. Peter Kreeft makes the analogy of a ship embarked on a journey. Kreeft writes, "The captain of a ship at sea may see a harbor with a sign stating home and happiness. The agnostic captain may choose not to put into port, but also to not depart from it. Rather, he decides to anchor at a distance offshore, hoping the weather may clear so that he may see the sign more distinctly. Such an attitude is flawed, however. There will come a point of no return when it is too late to come into port." End quote. The eventual cessation of life mandates a decision. Indecision is an illogical choice. I would be remiss if I did not provide some comment on how to acquire forgiveness from God and eternal security in heaven. It is tempting to provide some kind of one-size-fits-all prayer or formula that certifies the participant as a bona fide Christian. This would trivialize the process, however. Entree to Christian faith is profoundly simple, yet at the same time messy and uncomfortable. It requires introspection, the recognition of one's personal moral bankruptcy, and acknowledgement of the need for God's forgiveness. The first Christian convert serves as an example and guide on how to receive forgiveness from God and eternal life. Jesus was not crucified alone. A man crucified next to Jesus blasphemed him and said, "Aren't you the Christ? Save yourself and us." However, another convicted felon crucified that day rebuffed the man who derided Jesus, saying, "Don't you fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we rightly so, for we are getting what we deserve for what we did, but this man has done nothing wrong." After this, he spoke directly to Jesus with perhaps the simplest of any prayer. He said, "Jesus, remember me when you come in your kingdom." Jesus responded that he would be in paradise with him later that day. That convicted felon became the first Christian. He knew he deserved the death sentence, but he recognized Jesus as the Messiah and the person who could grant him forgiveness and entry to heaven upon death. Your own prayer need not be more complex. However, the same recognition of moral insufficiency and the humility to ask forgiveness from Jesus Christ is required. Such a prayer is never rejected. Christianity would not exist without the death and resurrection of Jesus. It is unique among religions in that its origin can be traced to historical events. Christian faith is not blind, irrational, or contradictory to the historical record. There is a logical basis for belief in Jesus. May the peace of forgiveness and the assurance of eternal life be with you through Jesus Christ. Joseph W. Bergeron, M.D.